Welcome everyone. Today we have with us Vikram Srinivasan Sir. He is the co-founder of needl.ai. He has done his Bachelor in Science in Physics from Madras Christian College. Then he later pursued his ME in Electrical Engineering from Indian Institute of Science. And he also pursued his PhD from US San Diego. And now he is the founder of needl.ai. Many of you might be using needl.ai. It aggregates all your data feed from different platforms such as Google Drive, Gmail, Twitter, or Telegram into one single feed, which you can play around with a lot of their features. Welcome on the podcast, sir.
Thank you, Jay. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you for coming, sir. The first question is, sir, what was your early life education like? As I shared in your introduction only, what inspired you to pursue Bachelor in Physics and then later a PhD also?
Sure. So actually, I grew up in a very academic family. My father was a professor of physics at IIT Madras. My uncle was a
Fantastic.
prof at IIT Madras.
Wow.
Another uncle was a prof at Stanford. So at some level, when I was growing up, the default assumption was that I would do a PhD and become an academic, a professor. Because of the environment I grew up in. I grew up on the IIT Madras campus. And since my father was a physicist, physics was very close to my heart. And I started off thinking that I wanted to do physics. But later, when I was graduating, it was just about the time that India was liberalizing, opening up, etc. And later I realized I wanted to do engineering, primarily because that's where the jobs also were, and physics was a tough grind. So at that point of time in India at IISc Bangalore, which is one of the premier research institutes in India, there used to be this integrated masters in engineering for folks who had a bachelor's in the sciences. So it was again a very competitive exam. I wrote that exam and I got through. And at that point of time, I thought I wanted to do electrical engineering because electronics, because physics was very close to my heart, and I wanted to do something very close to where I could apply physics. But again, everything in life evolves. So once I got into that program and started doing stuff, I got fascinated by what is called wireless networking, wireless communications. I had a very good advisor. And at that point of time, startups, etc., were unknown in India. There was nobody doing startups.
What was time period at this time, sir? Around 19?
Mid-90s.
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 Just tech was introduced, right? IT sector, Infosys, all these companies were just ramping up.
Yeah, Infosys was just ramping up. But at that point of time, this was all services sector in India. So the job. So if you were very intellectually curious and wanted to do interesting jobs, it was still service sector jobs, and that was not something I wanted to do at that point of time.
There was no product-based market there.
No, product companies were unheard of in India until I would say around 2010 or so. So
it was, and 2010, I think the startup culture began, right? Like Byju's, all these startups started.
Flipkart, and even before Byju's, there was Flipkart, and all those companies started much later. So I decided to pursue a PhD again because that was something always on the cards, and I did want to become an academic at that point of time. So I went to the University of California at San Diego. It's a very good university. It's a beautiful city in the US, right by the ocean. So I spent 5 years there getting my PhD.
So what was your PhD in, sir? Like the subject?
Yeah, it was in the field of wireless networking, wireless communications, things like that. So I did a PhD. I had a good publication record. I was very happy with my PhD. But after 5 years in the US, I wanted to move back closer to India at least. And my wife is a biochemist, and we were looking to move back closer to India. So we got a job. Both of us managed to get jobs in Singapore. So I got a job as a assistant professor at the National University of Singapore.
Wow. NUS.
Yeah, NUS. So we moved to Singapore, and I spent 4 years there. I did very well. advised 3 PhD students. I taught a bunch of courses. I published exceptionally well, had good research papers, etc. But I was still not satisfied because two reasons. I think, unlike, say, at that point of time, also Singapore was very different from what it is today. It was primarily a financial services sector. There was no tech at that point of time, so there was no industry to collaborate with. So ideally, my inclinations were becoming, more and more how to get my ideas into the world out there and create impact with people using what I was building. So unlike a Stanford, for example, where there's a thriving ecosystem of startups and stuff, Singapore still, at that point, all that was not there. So I thought, and India was starting to boom. And there were some product companies starting, but not much yet. So I decided to move back to India to a research lab called Bell Labs. So Bell Labs in the US was the pioneering research laboratory. It's named after Alexander Graham Bell, the guy who invented the telephone. So
what were you researching in there, sir? Bell Labs?
I continue to do research on
wireless communication,
telecom, cloud-based infrastructure, etc. So Bell Labs is a top-notch research lab. So I moved to that. I was heading their networking research for Bell Labs India. Again, I was doing very well there, but the parent company, telecom as such, was going through a downturn at that point of time, and I was thinking about what to do. And then I think my biggest mentor at that point of time was going to do a startup. And he had reached out to me. It was in a completely different space, nothing to do with wireless networking. He database guy and search guy. And I was always interested in, at that point of time, I'd made up my mind, I did want to go do a startup. And so this mentor of mine reached out and said he's looking for folks to join him as a co-founder. And this was someone I'd known for 25 years, somebody with a stellar reputation, being a serial entrepreneur in the past, and somebody I really looked up to and admired. So without even thinking about what the startup was about, I said I would join him. At the end of the day, I mean, one lesson here is also many of the things I have decided to do in my life is not based on
lot of thinking,
whether I already knew it or whether I was good at it, but based on what the learning opportunity was. And seeing whether I would learn and grow significantly as doing something along those lines. And I would say most of my decisions have been driven by that one goal at some level. And it's always worked out for me. It's never bothered me that I don't know something. What I look at is the learning opportunity. So I joined Sesh, my mentor, in the startup called Zetata.
When was this time, sir? Around 2000?
This was around 2013. So it was when I joined my co-founder at Zetata. So Zetata was backed by VCs, by a couple of marquee VCs.
Fantastic. When was this started? At what location was this startup based? Singapore or India?
No, it was I was back in India by
then. Okay. Got it.
I moved back to India in 2007, and so I was in Bell Labs for 6 years in India, and then the startup opportunity came, and I jumped at it.
Fantastic.
And we got together, and what we were doing was building essentially a search engine for e-commerce retailers. So if you think about whenever you go to Amazon or Flipkart, how do you find a product? You typically search for it. And when you search for it, you find the product you need and you can convert. You make a decision to buy or not.
Correct.
Now, the problem is, at least at that point of time, many of these search engines for the e-commerce retailers did not work very well. Because people can come in and type what they want in many, many different ways. And the product catalog, for example, has some catalog manager has described the product in a certain way. but how the user comes and asks for it could be completely different, right?
Correct.
And so they often, if they don't find what they want, they go away, and it's a lost opportunity to sell your product to them.
Correct.
So what we built was essentially a search engine that would make it very easy for you to find exactly what you need and make a buy decision.
Wow.
Okay, so we had customers in India and the US, and eventually there is a very big retailer in the US called Target. So Walmart and Target are two of the biggest retail companies in the US,
Yeah.
and Target made us an offer to acquire us, and we got acquired by Target. At Target, our search technology was integrated, and I can't say the exact numbers difference that we made, but
Yeah, no issues.
confidential. But year-on-year revenue for them, for digital revenue, increased by several $100 million a year. So we are very
fantastic.
happy with that outcome. And but the entrepreneurial bug bit me again.
I have a question here, sir. Like when a startup gets acquired, what exactly is acquired? Like the product-based companies, is the product being integration is what the acquiring company wants, or some other things that the acquiring company wants?
So there are many different reasons you could acquire a company for. You could acquire it for its business, or you could acquire it for its tech. In our case, we were getting acquired for our tech, which we had to integrate our tech into Target's search infrastructure. Right?
Yeah,
so that's what we did, and that's what I spent a few years there doing, that integrating it into Target's search infrastructure. And then it was a happy moment to see that there was a huge difference there. So, but then again, once you've been bitten by the startup bug, you want to do it again. I felt I was in a place where I could build something much bigger and much more significant. And so that's where this next journey started with needl. Okay.
Sorry, I saw Kuntal Shah, sir, then?
Yeah, so let me come to how I met Kuntal. So first of all,
so those who don't know, Kuntal Shah is also co-founder of needl.ai.
Yeah,
and he's
so
a fantastic investor.
First off, let me say Kuntal Shah is my co-founder. One of the most brilliant people I've ever met and interacted with. Amazing person. So typically, if you look at co-founder stories, it's people who have known each other a long time. That's one constraint. Second is, it's people, even otherwise, it's people who are sort of stay in the same place. Sort of you are co-located, right? Live in the same city or whatever. So Kuntal and I, none of these are true. So Kuntal lives in Pune, I live in Bangalore. So that is one aspect. How did Kuntal and I meet? So Kuntal and I met due to someone who's very close, well known to both of us. This neighbor of Kuntal's, who Kuntal was very close to, also happens to be my cousin, who's somebody I grew up with, and somebody I'm very close to, and somebody I trust a lot. So my cousin I was looking to do something. Kuntal was looking to solve a pain point of his and wanted to talk to some tech folks. So my cousin introduced me to Kuntal, and I decided to sort of one day just fly down to Pune and over a weekend meet Kuntal, and we hit it off. So primarily, I look for two things when I want to work with someone. One, somebody with a very strong ethical bent, because you want to do business with people who are extremely ethical and do the right thing always. Kuntal was incredibly one such person. Second is I like to work with people who are exceptionally smart so that I can learn from them. So I'm always looking to learn, and I'm looking to learn by working with people who are smarter than me.
Correct.
And I felt Kuntal was one such person that I would learn a lot by working with him. So we got together a little over, I want to say 2.5 years ago or so. I was still at Target, but I used to fly down several weekends to meet him. We used to have conversations, and we decided to start Needle by primarily looking at pain points we thought that he felt and other people in the financial domain felt. And we started off there, but now it's grown into something much larger, a much more broad-based product, and that's where we are. And I think we have we have developed a good relationship, even though, it's very contrarian. It's not the typical co-founder story and all of that, but we are making it work.
Fantastic. What should entrepreneurs who are looking for a co-founder look in the co-founder, sir? Like in your case, it was opposite, contrarian, but still it worked out pretty well.
Right. So I think, at the end of the day,
it's subjective.
No, it's not subjective.
Uh-huh.
So a co-founder, getting the right co-founder is like getting the right spouse or wife or husband, right? It's no different, because you have to have the right. So it's going to be probably the hardest journey of your life. One of the hardest things that you do. Needle is probably the hardest thing I have done, even my earlier startup. And so you're going to be, and it's hard to predict also. Let me say, like you might do startups with good friends, and I know folks who started with good friends and then they, don't talk to each other, for example. It's really a commitment. It's all, if you look at those marriage vows they talk about, right? Be with you through thick and thin and all of that. That's pretty much what being a startup co-founder is. You're sort of going on this journey with your startup family, right? And your startup family is your co-founder, your employees, and you're literally in the trenches fighting. I think battle analogies are the right ones, because you're literally in the trenches on the back foot a lot of the time, fighting battles with folks, arm in arm, and sort of trying to make your way through it. So two aspects. One, as you go along, you develop relationships with people and you understand them better. But I think the most important thing that you want to look for is what is driving those people to do the startup, right? And what is driving you to do the startup, and what is driving the other person to do the startup. At some level, I would say startups have become a fashion these days. You want to do it, and because there's so much news and glorifying stories about founders, and every founder is portrayed as a genius who's the next Steve Jobs or whatever. That is not a true story, and a lot of it has also been driven by, I would say, the funding, easy availability of money
in the last 2 years.
In the last few years, people are just there's a lot of PR that's behind it, either coming from VC money or from the founders themselves. But the truth is, maybe less than 0.1% of those stories are true. Most startup founders, including me or Kuntal, none of us are geniuses. We are maybe stupid by even taking on this journey at some level, because no rational human being should ideally take on a journey like this, because it is very hard. You're always dealing with uncertainty. You're always dealing with ambiguity. You're sort of, and you don't have all the answers. Very frankly,
Yeah.
We are experimenting and figuring out answers on the fly, and sort of it's a jungle, and you're sort of hacking your way through the jungle.
Correct.
And that's the reality of it. And serendipitously, sometimes things work, sometimes things don't work, but you're hacking your way through this jungle and figuring out how to make things work. So I think that I don't know how many of your,
Uh-huh.
so the equivalent I would draw, I mean, maybe, I don't know if you guys know of Shackleton.
No.
Okay. So maybe I should draw an equivalent to his story. So he was this guy who tried to make it through to the South Pole, and there's a book by him early on in the 1900s or something. And he went along with this band of people. They couldn't make it to the South Pole, but if you look at how they survived, the grit with which they survived, how they made it back, that's the true story, right? It's the true story is about just somehow surviving through everything that is thrown at you. So if you want to look at what you look for in a co-founder, and it's some of it might be even very hard to answer upfront, because you find out people's true nature only when you're going through the tough times. Sorry, I'm maybe going too deep for someone your age, but I think you might get it.
Yeah.
But you really find someone's character only when the times are tough.
Yeah, like these times, right? The recession going on in startups when money can't be raised pretty easily.
Exactly. So, so that's why it's very hard to. So all you can look for is character. I think at the end of the day, character that shows perseverance and grit, that shows some record of perseverance and grit. So is it a good idea to start something with your best friend? Maybe not. Maybe you've known that person, but do they have a history of character and grit? You don't know, right? And you only find that out when you're going through tough times. And that is exactly what a startup is about. And it again comes to what the goals are, right? If you're driven by the hype, the fame, you think you'll get your name in the papers, media, and that's what is driving you, then those are the wrong reasons to do a startup. You should not do it at all. Because when the going gets tough, you will look to quit. So yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a very good answer, but I'm just trying to portray the reality of a startup. And at some level, you just need to have the degree, and there is some leap of faith that you're taking with your co-founder, just like you take with your spouse. But it's about whether, end of the day, it's whether you think they'll have the courage and grit to sort of wade through the tough times and make it happen. And I think that's what you need to look for.
Fantastic. Then the weekends that you were meeting with Kuntal Shah sir, that's the exact moment when you started up, or a little later?
No, so the weekends is when we were discussing the ideas and what we wanted to build. So we had a reasonably good idea of what we wanted to build, but again, at that point of time, the relationship also built up. And so I took the call to quit Target and do this startup with Kuntal full time. So I quit and dove into this company, and yeah, that's how we got started. We got started very small. We are currently still bootstrapped. And yeah, that's how we're going. So
then when you started up, how did you gradually build the tech that needle.ai needed, right? The experience that you had from the previous co-founding startup that you did that got acquired, did that same play? Because search engine, little bit of similarity in needle and that search engine.
Yeah, so this is a very different beast compared to
that one.
That product. I would say this is a far more complex product that we're building compared to what I had built earlier.
Yeah.
So first off, it also required a mindset shift in me to understand what we were building. That is one. Second, in terms of building the tech, more important than tech is finding the right people to build the tech for you.
So you have a team also, right? Fantastic.
Yeah. So I think the bigger question is, how do you build a team, especially when you're bootstrapped, because we were starting off very frugal. How do you build a team to help you to get to the right place? So I would say I'm very lucky on two fronts. So one, I have so a good friend of mine, somebody I worked with very well in the past, an absolute rock star engineer, been doing it for 30 years, is based in the US. I got him on board as a consultant to help us start building out the tech. That's one place I got lucky. Other places I got lucky also is in terms of the early hires I made. So I made hires. Again, we couldn't throw money at the problem. So I got some, couple of folks, say fresh out of college, and someone who's had experience in the US, but who's had experience in the past, but in a completely space and not enough experience. So I took some bets on people, and some of those bets worked out very well. So one of the guys, for example, a guy called Rahul, who's been working with me, now he's moving on to do his master's in the US. Has been a phenomenal hire for us, absolute rock star. There's other girl, Sneha, who we hired, turned out to be an absolute phenomenal rock star. So some of the bets have worked out very well. Of course, some didn't, but I think I got lucky in at least some of these folks who have turned out to be amazing hires for me. So I think the higher order bit is whom you hire. The tech is an iterative process. You figure it out. But I can come to that in great amount of detail. But I just want to emphasize the biggest, most important thing you need to get right is the people you hire and the culture you set. The challenge, of course, has been most of the team has been built during COVID when we've all been remote. So building a team, getting the culture right, especially in a very remote situation, I think more than anything, that has been the biggest challenge for us. That is extremely hard because when you're remote, you don't have those. First of all, developing relationships gets much harder, which is very important in a startup environment, because most of your conversations are purely about work. It's very transactional. You're just saying, "Yay, what?" You're trying to discuss an idea, or you're saying, "What's the update on this?" But you don't have those random water cooler conversations or lunch conversations. I mean, I guess you're in school, you're having good lunch conversation with your friends, which has nothing to do about homework or classes or anything like that. But all those are a very important part of developing culture, developing relationships with other people. And that has been a challenge because of COVID. But in spite of that, I would say I'm very proud of what the team has accomplished in this pure remote environment. So the folks who have worked out have done an amazing job. Because I think it's, as I said, needle is the hardest thing I've done. Let me explain why it's the hardest thing I've done. Part of it is, of course, due to COVID challenges. Remote and all of that. But I would say even the product that we are building, so we are not a single point solution at some level. So I don't know if folks here have used things like Notion, etc. We are building fairly complex, comprehensive solution, which means we have to think through a lot of complex details. And I mean, it's not, I'm not trying to say that building a complex solution or a complex product is good, but the value proposition that we are bringing to the table automatically implies that we have to build a bunch of fairly complex tech. So I would say the first piece that has been a challenge for us, and now I think we've gotten close to overcoming, is sort of aggregating data from all these sources that we're content sources that we're talking about, both from your private sources like Telegram, email, etc., all the way to your public RSS feeds, etc. Having that come in reliably, come in reasonably quickly is not easy, because first off, many of these guys have APIs. Each API has its own quirks. It works in weird ways, different ways.
Correct. The format of some APIs might be different.
Yeah.
Like some people might declare numbers as in a text format, things like that.
Yeah, there's all kind of a lot of quirks, like very, very, very different quirks, right? And then they have rate limits. They say you can't have more than a certain number of requests per minute, per second, all kinds of weirdness. So how do you make all of this work reliably at scale? How do you build infrastructure to make it work reliably at scale? So I would say, for example, we struggled a lot. I mean, if I just go through our journey, initially we used to struggle a lot just to get for each customer reliably, crawl, for example, all their maybe 10 GB of data reliably, 15 GB of data. Then there was one customer who came to us who had a OneDrive integration, which was 330 GB. We were like, what the heck? Crazy. How are we going to do this? And how do we do this reliably?
Did your server crash after that sort of huge data?
No, servers didn't. It was not the problem with the servers. I mean, we've architected it well so that even we can recover from failure. I mean, so those are some of the challenges. Right? Like, how do you recover from failures? How do you maintain state? What is the right state to maintain? You don't want to crawl the same things again and again, because that adds to your cost. So all of that, how do you get smart about it? Plus deal with the quirks of this particular API in terms of how it says, how can I say, for example, get me all data since so and so. And each API provides it in a very different way out of for that.
Exactly.
So those are the things which were huge challenges. But one of the, like Sneha, this girl I spoke about, she initially started doing front end for us and said, okay, now I don't want to do front end anymore. I want to do data crawls and data pipelines, build it reliably. And so she took it as a challenge to say that we will crawl 330 GB, and she persisted, persevered, and we managed it. So that was a huge win, gave us confidence. And now we see sometimes there are some customers for whom we have crawled 12 terabytes of their data and we didn't even know about it. It all went through seamlessly. And then one day we looked at who's using most data, and then there's this person with 12 terabytes of data. We are now able to operate at scale in terms of how we crawl the data and make it work. The second piece, and this is probably at some level, the tech part is conquerable and doable. I would say the hardest part is the product thinking and the user interface, because
exactly.
Right, and how to make it intuitive and how to make it easy for the customer to realize value.
I can just relate with this. Like, for example, in my case also, right, sure, the backend work, like somehow I'll manage that work, but the UI UX is like huge difficult, right? You have to figure out what's the font color of the button, at what place to place it in the whole desktop and mobile view.
Exactly. And that is somewhat multidisciplinary, because it involves, I would say, some product thinking, which is also understanding psychology of users, understanding how they like things, and then having someone with the right aesthetics to determine some of the things that you're talking about, and the right tech. All of them have to come together. And for me personally, I would say for me, that's the biggest challenge. And this is something we're still, I wouldn't say we're maybe 20% there or 30% there. We haven't conquered it. And I would say the biggest challenge we have is, given how complex a product is, how do we make our interface very simple and easy for our customers to use? So that's a huge challenge. Now on the search side, but now, so we have gotten, I think, to a good place where we have some reliable integrations of data. Data is coming in. The user interface is in somewhat, it's at least usable if we train the users at some level. Now the next stuff that I will be focusing more on is also on the AI aspects of it. Go to yeah, because we are dealing with large data at this point of time, and once you have data, AI automatically starts delivering value. So how to leverage that is the next parts that we will be looking.
So you mentioned that the user can add their data to it. So you store initially the data, right? Because many of the other aggregators, I think, just pull out the data on the go. Like for example, they will integrate the API, but I think you store the data so you can also search within that database for some keywords. Correct.
Jay, I mean, means so first of all, kudos. I think as a 10th grader to understand that difference is amazing, because we have been trying to explain this to a lot of people and they don't get it, but you're bang on, right? So so for the folks who don't understand what we are trying to do, let me just explain what we are trying to do. So Needle is a platform. So if you look at who are our target audience, our target audience are folks who spend, as part of their day job, as part of their work, who spend a lot of time consuming content from a variety of different sources, taking some action on it, maybe curating it, synthesizing it, taking notes on it, highlighting stuff, and then making decisions based on that and sharing that insight, etc., with their teams, with their peers and collaborators. Today, the problem is this entire workflow that you look at, starting from finding your content that matters to you, to doing the curation and synthesis of the content that you find relevant, to sharing and collaborating. Every part of this journey is highly fragmented. So first off, all your content sources are fragmented. You're getting very relevant business critical data or content from, say, your news site, blog sites, podcasts like this, etc., all the way to content coming from your private data sources. It could be your email, it could be chat applications like WhatsApp, Telegram, Slack, all the way to stuff that's stored by you on your note-taking applications, drives, etc. So, and the problem today is there is an explosion of content sources, and it's very hard for you to keep on top of things that matter to you, because you're spending a lot of time just switching between your applications and finding what you need. So the first step, the first silo we wanted to break, or fragmentation we wanted to break, is the ability to aggregate all your content into one single place, right? So what Needle does is takes all the content that matters to you. We give you a lot of control and choice in terms of what you can integrate, and aggregates all of that content into one single location. And this is where, so now once you have it in one single location is where Jay's insight comes in, right? It's like, if you're just pulling it from an API, for example, on the fly, if there are words deep within documents, etc., you cannot search for it. If you want to do any downstream processing on top of the content, you need to have the content located in one single place. So you can have other kinds of cloud computing come on top of it. So
another point here is like you have many data sources like Telegram, Twitter, YouTube. So if you pull it on the go and then also search within that, when you pull it on the go, I think the latency would be very high there.
Yes, latency is very high.
If you have in your database, it's just this.
Yeah. Jay, yeah, I think we can have a long technical conversation. I'll explain to you more nuances than just that, right?
Yeah.
So one is latency, Jay. The other is you cannot have a uniform search ranking algorithm running across all your content sources, because each one is using their own ranking algorithm to return what they think is relevant to your search.
Correct.
Right?
Got it.
So it's not uniform. So what Telegram sends back to you might be junk, while WhatsApp sends to you might be relevant. Now, how do I sort of aggregate and rank it so that I serve up only what's most relevant to you? You cannot do all of those things once data is distributed in the local app. Okay? So which is why we need to pull it into a single location. So now what we have made it easy, again, to the brilliant point Jay is making, is that it's easy for you to find what you need when you need, irrespective of where it is, right? So for example, many of our customers says Needle becomes their starting point for any research that they do. That's where they start and then go on to do other things. So now, once you've found the content, you might want to do a bunch of things on it. You might want to annotate, you might want to highlight, you might want to just tag documents. So interesting thing is, for example, I have tagged stuff across my emails, across some PDF documents I have, across my Twitter, across my RSS sources, across podcasts. So there's no tool today that allows you to, for example, the simplest example of curation and annotation is tagging and bookmarking, right? There is no single tool today that allows you to tag and across platform. There's nothing that allows you to do it. Next is this is something we're building, the ability to take notes across platforms, right? Again, that's something that's coming. And so these are sort of what we call human driven curation, which is the human says, I want to bookmark it, I want to tag it, I want to take a note on it. That is human driven computation. I might also want to do some machine driven curation and synthesis, right? Which is something we will build, which is again cross platform. If I have an interesting document, can I summarize it automatically? If I have a series of tweets, can I do, for example, sentiment analysis? So those are things we can add on top of this, which we haven't built yet, but which we will be building.
But you're doing sentiment analysis on con calls, right? Which is pretty great.
Yeah. On conference calls, we're doing, actually, we when we started the company, we were doing it on tweets, on WhatsApp, and anything, but from a product point of view, it didn't make sense. So we scaled back, but we will be bringing it all back soon as the product evolves. So now the next thing is, once you have all of this, maybe you're doing research on, you could be a financial investor, you're doing research on a company, on a sector, on crypto, whatever. You have all your research essentially now in one place, right? Across multiple sources. But most of us work in teams, right? We don't work in isolation. So now if you want to share or collaborate or exchange ideas, because an important part, I know this is the age of AI, where we think, machines are taking over and machines are becoming smarter than humans. My belief, I personally don't think that's true. Humans are still way smarter than machines, because what AI does for you today is simple. It's, I don't know, the Indian education system, for example, allows you to mug and repeat, right? That is essentially what AI does. You give it a lot of examples from the past, and then you're giving it an exam. It's basically looking at all the examples from the past and repeating something. And even this sentient AI, I don't know if you've seen this news about Google saying, some guy from Google saying their AI has become sentient. It's just, I would say, rote memorization, which is what is happening with AI. But that rote memorization has a value, because machines don't get tired. Machines can work all the time, and that rote memorization does have a value. Creativity and insight will have to come from humans. Now, creativity and insight can come from humans in isolation. I can just keep reading and thinking and talking, but a lot of the creativity gets unlocked when I'm able to talk to other humans, because collective intelligence is always way more powerful than individual intelligence.
Correct. I think the current AI that we have is more of a pattern recognition than thinking, like the neurons in the brain.
Exactly. It's essentially pattern recognition and nothing more. It looks wow, but it's nothing more than pattern recognition at the end of the day.
Have you looked at DALL-E 2, sir, by OpenAI?
Yeah. I've seen all that, but all of that is just, believe me, it's, if you have, like OpenAI, like Google, like Facebook, if you have such humongous
Data.
compute resources, two things that you need: compute resources and data, right? If you have both of them at such vast scale, I mean, they're running data centers, they're putting data centers under the ocean to cool it. That, I mean, those guys have infinite resources at their hands, right? So, and they have humongous, all of us are feeding it data, right? These machines.
Correct.
Every time I upload, take a picture on my Google Photos, every time I post something on Facebook, every time I share a picture on WhatsApp, on Insta, we 7 billion people on the planet are feeding insane amounts of data to these hungry machines. And
Correct.
so they have immense amount of compute power and data at their hands to learn all kinds of crazy pattern recognition, which is what they are doing, right? So they're training, even if you look at their models, they're humongous models, right? I think you've been using GPT-2 or GPT-3 for your
GPT-3.
CapEx.
Yeah.
GPT-3. Can a startup use it profitably at scale?
Great. No, it's not impossible.
It's impossible, right? Because they are like at a minimum of 200 billion parameters to give you what that means. Each parameter is a floating point number of at least probably 100 dimensions. Each floating point number is, I think, at least, I need to look it up. I don't
Yeah.
remember, but 8 bytes
Yeah.
minimum, I think, or probably more. I need to, sorry, I'm
No,
forgetting the
no
number.
issues. No issues.
So if you just look at the scale at which they're operating, it's crazy, right? So training itself is very expensive. Uh, you're probably burning more fossil fuel than, you know, one small residential complex for a month or something to train these models. Um, at inference time, which is like when you want to do your capex detection, for example, it's only inference. Training is way more computationally expensive than inference, but even that becomes very expensive to do, right? And that those are the challenges.
Correct. I think
Uh,
even if you have to fine tune GPT-3 to your use case, it's like for my case it was around $3 to $5 because
yeah,
I had very less data, right, of capex. But at scale, like you are operating, right, like 12 terabyte of data. I think if even if one user, you would go bankrupt if you use
yeah,
GPT-3.
absolutely. Absolutely. So those are the challenges. So where were we? I was coming back to the fact that machines do essentially
Correct.
rote memorization,
Huh.
large compute power, large memory, very rich companies who are feeding off your advertising dollars, right? The data you give them for free and the advertising dollars they make off it. But at the end of the day, it's still rote memorization. Real insight and creativity comes from collective intelligence of humans, right? And especially when we get together, start discussing, that's when it happens. So that's the final piece that we want to conquer, which is enable collaboration around this data that is there, and that sort of completes the loop. And that's the vision of Needle. And it's a very challenging, very hard product to build, but it's also very exciting. If we pull it off, I think uh, uh, Kuntal and I would be very, very happy if we could pull it off.
Fantastic, sir. The My next question is, you are all doing this bootstrap, right? Bootstrap is a bootstrap startup, right?
Yeah.
How much difficulty is to make a bootstrap startup? Because the last startup that you did was I think VC backed, right?
Yeah. So I mean, as of now, we are bootstrapped. We will at some point raise money.
Wow.
That is there. So I think there are pros and cons to building bootstrap versus VC. I mean, it's both can go out of
And
fashion and whatever, right? So at the end of the day, if you, I mean, there are all these nice hero stories of people building it bootstrapped or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, you need capital to get to a certain product market fit. Now the decision is, Yeah, so you need capital to get to that product market fit. And can you get to that product market fit before you run out of money, right? And which is where VC money comes in at some point, some level. Now, again, there are um, so the VC money comes in, helps you get capital, but it also puts a lot of pressure on you to deliver very, very quickly.
True.
It's not, the main difference is it's not patient capital. It's good capital if you get it from the right investors, and we had good investors in the past. Uh, they were very helpful, etc. But it also comes with, I mean, it's natural, right? They have taken somebody else's money.
You have given money, you in returns.
Yeah, and not only that, it's not just they're not giving it out of their pockets. They have raised money from limited partners, and they're limited, and they have a duty to their limited partners to return money on that, which is a completely fair ask. And we as entrepreneurs have a duty to our investors to return money on their investment, right? So all through the cycle, it is a sacred duty that we have to hold. But as a consequence, it does come with a lot of pressures also to start, to start getting to product market fit very quickly, especially depending on when you raise the money. In my last startup, because of who me and my co-founder, where we almost got product market fit money based on our ideas and stuff like that. In this startup, so far we've been bootstrapped. We've just been iterating on the product, gotten it to a good place. We're confident of product market fit. So at some point we will take some capital, because the capital does help you go faster. So it's, I mean, I would say it's different strokes for different folks. I don't think there's one right answer. It's also a function of what you want to achieve, right? So if you want to be, I mean, there are companies like Atlassian who have grown very, very big. So I think, yeah, the bottom line, what I'd like to say is, if you look at the history of lots of companies which have succeeded, there are many, many, many paths to success. And the path to success is a function of the time horizon you have. It's a function of essentially your goals and your ambitions. So if you're, for example, Sridhar Vembu of Zoho has taken absolutely no money from anyone, but he's built a sustainable. Zoho,
yeah.
Yeah. So he's an amazing, incredible human being. You should read up some of his stories. The founder, Sridhar Vembu, exceptionally smart and talented person, who has built a company over 20 plus years. It didn't become, it was not a rocket ship, right? So it's essentially a question of what your goals and ambitions are. If you're looking for an exit 5-10 years down the line, if that's the mindset you come with, and you want to grow really fast, then maybe VC money is the right thing for you. If you're in it for the long haul and this is all you want to do, maybe you want to bootstrap. But there's also a time horizon, right? At some point, if you're not growing fast enough, somebody else might come and upend you. So then you will need capital to grow faster. So it's a complex dynamic based on a variety of things. Your goals as an entrepreneur, what the market is, what the market dynamics are. So there is no single answer, and every answer can be both the right answer or the wrong answer based on what the outcome is. I mean, right, out of 100 startups, 99 fail.
Correct.
So 99 of them have had the wrong outcome. And if you look at those 99 of them, a lot of them would have taken VC money, outside money. A lot of them would not have taken.
So
So
startup can also fail and a VC can also succeed. Both
also
can happen.
fail. So there is luck. There's luck also. There's timing. There are a lot of extraneous factors that also come into play. And for those folks who are sort of in the investing world, I mean, so I think, I mean, so there are these concentrated investors and there are sort of broad. So the safest investing you can do is an index investing, right? So you sort of invest in a mutual fund or an index-based investing, and you don't do outstandingly well, but you can't do worse in the market either. On the other extreme, there are concentrated investors who invest in only one or two companies. So as a founder, the way I look at it, I'm investing my life, I'm making a very concentrated bet on one company, which is my startup. That's the way I look at it.
Fantastic. Sir. Another question that I have, sir, the last startup that you did, it was kind of a B2B space and a SaaS product. So
Yeah.
it was a kind of a mix of services and product, right? In this that you are needl.ai you're doing is completely product B2C space, right? So what do you think is the
No, actually.
yeah. You're
So
saying
let me, yeah, sorry. So let me just sort of stop you there. So where we believe our revenue will come from will be from businesses. So we also plan to be in the B2B space, and so what the strategy we're trying to adopt is something called product-led growth. So the idea behind product, if you look at companies like Slack, GitHub, etc., they've had a product-led growth, right? So where do you think GitHub's revenue comes from? It comes from
B2B.
Lots of businesses, right? But I'm sure I think you have a GitHub account. I know you use GitHub Actions and all of that.
Yeah.
Right? So there are a lot of individuals who post their code on GitHub. Why? So what is that allowed? Essentially, individuals come, use the product, find it easy to use, and they then evangelize it within their organizations. And then the organizations adopt it. So this is called, and I'm not saying anything new, this is called product-led growth. If you're able to do product-led growth, the advantage is your cost of customer acquisition becomes much lower. Right?
Like for example, if in an engineering college, 4 out of 5 people use GitHub, and then they are placed into different companies. The companies will eventually have to shift on GitHub.
Exactly. Those are the kind of things. So we believe our revenues will come from B2B businesses, but our DAU or WAU, weekly active users, daily active users, will come from end users. That's what we want to do, but we are not there yet in terms of product. To do that, you need to have a very simple product, very intuitive product, very easy to use. We are not there yet. Those are things that we need to work on.
Fantastic. Thanks for coming on the podcast, sir. Learned a lot from this.
No problem. It was a pleasure talking to you, Jay. And I think we've spoken before. I think you're doing an amazing job, not just with what you're doing with Shodh, right?
Yeah.
And these podcasts, etc. I think you have an extremely bright future ahead of you. So would love to help you out in any way possible. So feel free to reach out to us at me or Kuntal at any point of time. We're there to help you. Okay.
Thanks.